Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going deep on Atomic Habits by James Clear.
One of my favorite books on behavior change.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, I think a lot of listeners are really interested in how to build those good habits and break some bad ones.
Definitely.
But sometimes they can feel like there's just so much information out there, right?
Right.
Like, where do you even begin?
Totally.
So today we'll be extracting like those key principles and insights from Atomic Habits.
Perfect.
So we can give you those actionable strategies to actually make those changes.
Love that.
One of the things that really stood out to me in the book was that idea of identity-based habits.
Interesting.
So can you maybe tell us a bit more about what exactly Clear means by that?
Yeah. So, he really emphasizes that, lasting change isn't just about tweaking our actions. It's really about shifting our identity, like who we believe ourselves to be at our core.
Oh, okay. So it's not just about like doing the things, it's about becoming the person who does those things like naturally.
Exactly. Think of it this way. You might want to become a regular runner.
Right.
But if deep down you don't actually believe you are a runner,
Mm,
making running a consistent habit is going to be a constant uphill battle.
that makes sense. So how do we actually like shift that identity? It feels kind of intangible, right?
It is a subtle shift, but the book does give us some really concrete ways to approach it.
Okay, good.
Clear points out that every time you do go for that run, even if it's just a short one, you're casting a vote for that runner identity.
Oh, I love that.
And those actions repeated over time, they
Yeah.
start to reshape your self-image.
Wow. So it's like we're literally building that identity one step at a time.
Exactly.
I love that visual of casting votes for who we want to be.
Yeah.
It makes it feel so much more actionable.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's not about like overnight transformation, right?
Absolutely not.
It's those small, consistent efforts that lay the groundwork for lasting change.
And that brings us to another key idea from the book, The Plateau of Latent Potential.
Oh, tell me about it.
You know those times when you're putting in the effort, but it feels like you're not making any progress?
Ugh, yes. It's so discouraging when that happens.
Like you're just spinning your wheels.
Totally.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Clear explains that it's often during those seemingly stagnant periods that you're actually building momentum.
What, really?
It's like an ice cube melting. It sits there at 32 degrees, seemingly unchanging, but then suddenly, boom, it starts to melt.
So even when we feel like we're stuck, we might actually be closer to a breakthrough than we realize.
Exactly. And those small, consistent actions we're talking about,
Yeah.
those are what build up to those breakthroughs.
That's so encouraging to hear.
But to really solidify those actions into habits, we need to understand how they work at a deeper level.
Okay.
And Clear introduces this concept of the habit loop. It's a 4-stage process that drives all of our habits.
Okay, the habit loop. I'm intrigued. Break it down for me.
All right, so first there's the cue. This is the trigger that initiates the behavior. It could be a time of day, a location, an emotional state, anything that signals to your brain, hey, it's time for this habit.
Okay, so the cue is like the signal.
Exactly. And then comes the the motivational force behind the habit. We crave the reward that the habit promises.
So the craving is what drives us to actually do the thing.
Right. And next is the response, the actual habit itself, the action you take.
Okay, the response.
And finally, the reward, which satisfies the craving and reinforces the entire loop,
Got it.
making it more likely you'll repeat the habit in the future.
So it's like a cycle. The cue triggers the craving leads to the response, and then the reward reinforces the whole thing.
Precisely. It's a beautiful system.
It really is. And it makes sense why it can be so hard to break bad habits if that reward is really reinforcing that behavior.
Absolutely. And on the flip side, it shows us how we can create good habits by making sure all 4 stages are working together.
All right, so to create a new habit, you need all 4 of these stages working together. And if you want to break a bad habit, you could try to disrupt one of those stages.
It's like a recipe.
I like that analogy.
Each stage is crucial.
Okay, so let's maybe dive a little deeper into some of those stages, starting with cues.
Great.
Remember how we talked about the power of visual cues earlier?
Oh, yeah. You mean like how they put those stickers near the urinals in the Amsterdam airport to reduce spillage?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Clear uses that example to highlight how subtle changes to our environment can have a surprisingly large impact on our behavior.
It's a reminder that our environment is constantly shaping our actions, often without us even realizing it.
So if we want to build better habits, we need to be more intentional about designing our environment to support those habits.
Couldn't agree more. Clear even goes as far as to say that environment is the invisible hand that shapes human behavior.
Wow, so powerful. So what are some practical tips for like designing our environment to work for us instead of against us?
Well, one thing Clear suggests is making those desired habits more obvious
Okay.
and those unwanted habits less visible.
Okay, so like putting your running shoes right by the door
Exactly.
as you see them first thing in the morning.
Perfect example. Or if you're trying to cut back on sugary drinks,
Yeah.
don't keep them in plain sight on the kitchen counter. Out of sight, out of mind.
Right, so it's about being deliberate about what we expose ourselves to,
Yeah,
even in seemingly minor ways.
precisely. And on the flip side,
Yeah.
we can use that same principle to make undesirable habits more difficult.
Okay, I like that. So like if I want to reduce my screen time, I could put my phone in a drawer when I'm working instead of having it right there on my desk tempting me.
Exactly. Clear highlights that even small increases in friction
Oh.
can make a big difference in disrupting unwanted habits.
It's like building little speed bumps into those bad habits, making them less likely to take over.
I love that analogy.
Okay, so we've talked about making good habits obvious and bad habits invisible. What are some other ways we can make our environment work for us?
Well, Clear talks about the power of habit stacking, which we touched on earlier.
Oh, right, using existing habits as building blocks.
Exactly. It's about leveraging the momentum you already have from an existing habit to build a new one.
Right.
Like Clear's example, after I pour my morning coffee, I will meditate for 5 minutes.
Oh, that's a good one.
Right?
It feels so much easier to stick to a new habit when you anchor it to something you already do consistently.
Absolutely. And the book is full of clever habit stacking formulas.
Oh, cool.
He suggests brainstorming all the things you do automatically each day, from waking up to brushing your teeth,
Yeah.
and then thinking about how you can tack a new habit onto those existing routines.
So it's like using those existing habits as building blocks for a whole chain reaction of positive behaviors.
Exactly.
What's an existing habit in your daily routine that you could stack a new one onto?
Well, I always make a cup of tea first thing in the morning,
Okay.
so I could try adding a 5-minute stretching routine right after that.
Oh, that's a good one. And it really does feel less daunting when you think about building on something you already do without even thinking about it.
And remember, Clear's 2-minute rule.
Oh, right. Breaking it down into those tiny steps.
Yes. Break down new habits into mini versions that take 2 minutes or less.
Uh-huh.
It makes that initial hurdle feel much lower.
Right. Instead of saying, I'm going to work out for an hour, you could say, I'm going to put on my workout clothes.
Exactly. It sounds almost silly,
Yeah.
but that tiny first step can be the key to getting started and building momentum.
Okay, so we've talked about cues, the environment. What about the craving stage of the habit loop? How can we make those cravings work for us?
That's where Clear's idea of temptation bundling comes into play.
Oh, right. Pairing something you need to do with something you want to do.
Yes, it's like a little reward system built right into the habit.
Exactly.
For example, you could allow yourself to listen to your favorite podcast only while you're working out.
Oh, that's a good one.
Or you could watch your favorite TV show only while you're folding laundry.
I love that it's so smart. I actually use this strategy to get myself to drink more water.
Oh, really? How?
I only allow myself to have my afternoon latte after I've finished a liter of water.
That's brilliant. It really works, doesn't it? You're essentially training your brain to associate the habit you need to do with something pleasurable.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
feels so much less like a chore when you know there's a built-in reward waiting for you.
Okay, so we've talked about cues, cravings. What about the next stage of the habit loop, the response?
Yeah, let's get into that.
So when it comes to the response or the actual action of the habit, Clear emphasizes the importance of making it as easy and frictionless as possible.
Okay, so less scrolling on my phone, less snacking, less procrastinating. But what about when the habit itself is the hard part? Like, how do you make running easier when it's just physically hard?
I love that you brought this up because
Yeah.
it shows you're really thinking about how to apply this to your own life.
Mm-hmm.
And Clear provides a fascinating insight that's not as widely known. He talks about how successful people don't magically find those difficult tasks easier. They just find ways to show up and do them even when they don't feel like it.
So it's not about waiting for motivation to strike. It's about having the discipline to take action, even when you'd rather stay on the couch.
Precisely. And Clear suggests creating rituals and routines that make it easier to get started.
Oh, right. Like that story about the choreographer Twyla Thorpe.
Yes. Her simple ritual was to tell herself, I'm going to hail a cab each morning.
Mm-hmm.
And that simple act would trigger the rest of her routine, getting her to the studio.
It's such a great illustration of how a tiny action can create a cascade of positive behaviors. What's a tiny action you could do to kickstart a difficult habit for you?
Good question.
I know it's hard to think on the spot.
It is, well, I always struggle with getting started with writing.
Yeah.
So maybe my tiny action could be as simple as opening my laptop and creating a blank document.
Yeah.
It sounds almost too easy,
I know, right?
but maybe that's the point.
Sometimes those ridiculously small steps are the most effective because they lower the barrier to entry.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered cues, cravings, and responses. Let's talk about the final stage of the habit loop, the reward.
Ah, rewards. This is where things get really fun.
Our brains love rewards, right?
They do. Clear highlights the importance of immediate rewards to reinforce those good habits.
Because our brains love instant gratification, right?
So he calls it the cardinal rule of behavior change. What is immediately rewarded is repeated. What is immediately punished is avoided.
Okay, so we need to make sure we're rewarding ourselves for those good habits.
Absolutely.
So what are some ways we can make those rewards more immediate and satisfying?
Well, one thing Clear suggests is using a habit tracker to visually represent your progress.
Oh, I love habit trackers.
Me too.
It feels so good to check off those boxes and see how far you've come. It's almost like a game.
Exactly. It taps into our natural desire for progress and accomplishment.
What are some other ways to make rewards more effective? I'm always looking for new tips.
Well, Clear also talks about the importance of finding rewards that are intrinsically motivating,
Okay.
meaning they're aligned with your values and interests.
So it's not just about any old reward. It's about finding rewards that are personally meaningful to you.
Exactly. For example, if you're trying to build a habit of writing every day,
Mm-hmm.
your reward could be the satisfaction of creating something new, of expressing your thoughts and ideas.
Or if you're trying to build the habit of exercising,
Yes.
your reward could be the feeling of energy and vitality you get after a good workout.
It's about connecting those rewards to something deeper than just a fleeting pleasure.
I love that. So it's not just about tricking our brains with rewards. It's about finding rewards that truly align with who we are and what
Right.
we want to achieve.
Exactly. And as we build those good habits and experience those intrinsic rewards,
Yeah.
we're not just changing our behavior,
Right.
we're changing our identity. We're becoming the kind of person who values those things
Mm-hmm.
and makes them a priority in our lives.
It's like a positive feedback loop where our actions and our identity reinforce each other,
Exactly.
leading to lasting change. This is so insightful.
Yeah.
I'm already starting to rethink my own approach to habits and how I can make those rewards more meaningful.
It's an ongoing process, but one that can be incredibly rewarding.
This is so helpful. I can't wait to dive into some more of these strategies.
You too.
Should we take a quick break and come back with some more insights from Atomic Habits?
Sounds good. Okay, so, picking up where we left off, one of the things that really struck me about Atomic Habits is how clearly emphasizes the importance of understanding, that deeper meaning behind habit formation.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about achieving those external measures of success.
Right.
It's about becoming the person we want to be.
That really resonates with me. It's about using habits as a tool for self-discovery and growth.
Exactly.
Like each habit is a tiny step towards becoming that ideal version of ourselves.
Precisely. And that brings us to a concept that Clear doesn't explicitly address in his book, but I think it's, a crucial piece of the puzzle.
Okay, what's that?
The role of our subconscious mind.
The subconscious mind. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it feels a little mysterious and hard to grasp.
Yeah, a little bit. How does it play into our habits?
Well, it's actually incredibly relevant.
Oh.
Think about it. Our habits become automatic over time, right? We
Right.
no longer have to consciously think about brushing our teeth or driving a car.
Right, it just happens.
Exactly. Those actions have become encoded in our subconscious mind,
Okay.
allowing us to perform them effortlessly.
So our subconscious is essentially running the show when it comes to our habits.
In many ways, yes. And that's why it can be so challenging to change those deeply ingrained habits.
That makes sense.
We're often not even aware of the subconscious processes that are driving our behavior.
So how do we tap into the power of the subconscious mind to support our efforts to build better habits? Do we need to hypnotize ourselves?
Not quite. But Clear does suggest some practical techniques that can help us reprogram our subconscious beliefs.
Oh, okay, good.
One approach is to use affirmations.
Affirmations like those positive statements people repeat to themselves.
Exactly. The idea is that by consistently repeating affirmations,
Okay.
we can start to change those subconscious beliefs that might be holding us back.
So if you're trying to cultivate a habit of regular exercise, you might repeat the affirmation, I am strong and healthy. I love moving my body.
Exactly. It's like planting little seeds of positive belief in our
I
minds.
love that analogy, and I can see how that might work.
And another powerful technique Clear suggests is visualization.
Visualization, I've heard of that, but I'm not sure how it works.
It's actually quite simple. It involves creating vivid mental images of yourself successfully performing the desired habit.
Oh,
For instance, if you're aiming to meditate each morning, spend a few minutes every day picturing yourself sitting peacefully, focusing on your breath,
hmm.
and feeling a sense of calm washing over you.
I can almost feel it just thinking about it.
Right.
So the idea is that these mental rehearsals strengthen the neural pathways in our brain,
Exactly.
making it more likely we'll follow through in reality.
You got it. It's like giving your subconscious mind a blueprint for success.
That's such a cool way to think about it. And I've heard that athletes and performers use visualization all the time
They do.
to improve their performance.
Yes.
So it makes sense that it could work for habit formation too.
Absolutely.
Okay, so visualization, I'm definitely going to try that.
Awesome.
But what about when those inevitable setbacks hit? How do we deal with those moments of failure?
Yeah, setbacks are a natural part of the process.
Mm,
It's important to remember that building better habits is not linear.
right.
There will be bumps along the way.
Yeah.
Times when we slip up, miss a day, or just feel completely discouraged.
I know that intellectually, but it's still so easy to get down on yourself when those setbacks happen.
Absolutely, it's a human response.
Yeah.
But here's where self-compassion becomes crucial.
Oh, that's a good point.
Clear doesn't talk much about this explicitly, but I think it's essential.
Okay.
We need to treat ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer a friend
Right.
who's struggling with a new habit.
That's so true. It's way too easy to be our own harshest critic.
Right. So instead of beating ourselves up, what should we do when those setbacks happen?
Okay. Yeah. What's the approach?
Well, first, acknowledge that it's okay.
Okay.
It doesn't mean you failed or that you're not capable of change.
Hmm.
It's simply a part of the process.
Right.
And then try to reflect on what might have triggered the slip up, without judgment.
So instead of just thinking, I'm so weak, I can't believe I ate that entire bag of chips.
Right.
I might try to think about what was going on before that happened. Was I stressed, tired, bored?
That's exactly it. And then you can use that information
Yeah.
to come up with a plan for how to handle similar situations in the future.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So it's not about striving for perfection. It's about learning from those setbacks and using them as opportunities to adjust our approach.
Exactly. And remember, Clear's never miss twice rule. If you do slip up, just try your best to get back on track as quickly as possible.
Right.
Don't let one setback derail your entire progress.
I'm really starting to see how much mindset plays into all of this.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about the mechanics of habit formation.
Right.
It's about our beliefs, our attitudes, and our ability to be kind to ourselves throughout the process.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And speaking of mindset, Clear mentions a really fascinating concept he calls the aggregation of marginal gains.
Aggregation of marginal gains, that sounds a little intimidating. What does it mean?
It's actually a really simple but powerful idea.
Okay.
It's about the cumulative impact of making small, consistent improvements over time.
Okay.
Clear tells the story of Dave Brailsford, the coach of the British cycling team.
Oh, right.
Mm-hmm.
The team that went from being mediocre to dominating the cycling world.
Exactly. He was obsessed with this idea of making tiny improvements in every aspect of the team's performance.
Interesting.
He looked at the design of the bikes, the athletes' sleep habits, their nutrition, even the type of pillows they used.
So he didn't just focus on the big, obvious things.
Nope.
He looked for those tiny little edges that could add up to something significant.
Precisely, and it worked.
Wow.
The British cycling team went on to win numerous Olympic gold medals and Tour de France titles.
That's amazing. It's a perfect example of how those seemingly insignificant changes, when applied consistently over time, can lead to extraordinary results.
Exactly, and it's not just relevant to cycling. It applies to any area of our lives.
Right.
If we can find those 1% improvements in our habits and our skills and our knowledge, those small gains can compound over time to create remarkable transformations.
That's so inspiring. It
Yeah.
really does take the pressure off of having to make those huge sweeping changes all at once. Instead, we can focus on getting a little bit better each day.
Precisely, it's about embracing the power of consistency and the long game.
The long game. Yeah, I like that.
And speaking of consistency, let's talk about another important factor that Clear doesn't explicitly address in his book,
Okay.
but I think it's crucial.
I'm intrigued. What is it?
The role of emotions in habit formation.
Emotions, it seems like we've been talking about emotions all along.
You're right, we have.
Our cravings, our self-compassion, our motivation, those are all fueled by emotions, right?
You're absolutely right. And Clear does acknowledge the role of emotions in the habit loop.
Mm-hmm.
Remember those two key drivers he talks about, wanting and liking?
Right. Desire gets us started, but pleasure keeps us going back for more.
Precisely. And that's where the concept of mindfulness can be incredibly helpful for building better habits.
Mindfulness. Okay, I'm curious. How does that fit in?
Well, mindfulness is about paying attention to our present moment experience without judgment.
Okay.
And it can be incredibly helpful for understanding the emotional triggers that drive our habits.
So it's about being more aware of what's going on inside us
Yeah.
without getting swept away by those emotions.
Exactly. For example, if you're trying to break a habit of emotional eating, mindfulness can help you become more aware of those thoughts and feelings that lead you to reach for that bag of chips or that pint of ice cream.
So instead of just mindlessly grabbing that snack when I'm stressed, I might take a moment to pause
Yes.
and really tune into what I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Am I actually hungry, or am I just trying to numb out some uncomfortable emotions?
That's exactly it. And once you become more aware of those triggers, you can start to develop healthier coping mechanisms.
Okay.
It might be taking a few deep breaths, going for a walk, journaling, or calling a friend.
It's about finding those strategies that help us manage those difficult emotions
Yes.
without resorting to those unhealthy habits.
Precisely.
This is making me think about how important it is to build habits that actually make us feel good,
Mm.
not just in the moment, but in the long run, too.
I'm so glad you brought that up. That's a perfect segue into another concept that Clear touches upon.
Okay, what's that?
The idea of flow state.
Flow state.
Mm.
Oh, I've heard of that. It's like that magical state of being completely absorbed in an activity
Yes.
where time seems to fly by and you're totally in the zone. I usually experience that when I'm writing,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't happen often enough.
Exactly. And Clear highlights that flow state is not just something that happens randomly.
Right.
It's something that we can cultivate by understanding the conditions that make it more likely to occur.
Okay, so how do we create more flow in our lives?
Well, Clear suggests finding activities that challenge us just enough,
Okay.
that are neither too easy nor too hard. He refers to it as the Goldilocks rule.
The Goldilocks rule. Oh, I like that.
Right.
So it has to be challenging enough to keep us engaged, but not so difficult that it becomes overwhelming.
It's finding that sweet spot where we're stretching our abilities but not getting totally frustrated.
Exactly.
And when we're in that flow state, not only do we enjoy the activity more,
Mm-hmm.
but we also tend to be much more productive and creative.
So it's not just about feeling good, it's about doing our best work.
Absolutely. Any tips for how to find that flow state more often?
That's a good question.
Well, Clear suggests setting aside dedicated time for those activities that bring us joy
Okay.
and challenge us in a meaningful way,
Okay.
and creating a space where you can fully focus, minimizing distractions.
So it's about being intentional with our time and creating the right conditions for flow to occur.
Precisely. But what about those times when we're not doing those flow state activities?
Right.
How do we make sure even those everyday tasks
Mhm.
are aligned with our overall goals and values?
That's a great question. It brings us to a key point that Clear makes throughout the book. And it's something we've touched upon a few times already, the power of aligning our habits with our values.
Exactly. We've talked about how habits are like votes for the type of person we want to become.
Hmm.
But how do those votes connect to our values?
Yeah. How do we actually make that connection?
Well, values are those deeply held beliefs that guide our decisions and actions. They're the things that are truly important to us, like honesty, kindness, creativity, or adventure.
Right, the big picture stuff.
Exactly.
Hmm.
So how do we actually make that connection between those big picture values and those tiny everyday habits?
Yeah.
Clear suggests we ask ourselves a few key questions.
Okay.
What do I stand for?
Okay.
What are my guiding principles?
Mhm.
What do I want my life to be about?
Those are some big questions,
Yeah,
but I can see how they could help us get clear on what truly matters to us.
exactly. And once we've identified those core values, we can start to evaluate our habits.
Yeah.
Are they aligned with what we truly care about?
Right, are they helping us move closer to the person we want to be?
And if they're not, then maybe it's time to make some adjustments.
Right, to realign.
Precisely. It's about creating a life that feels authentic and meaningful, a life that reflects who we are at our best.
Okay, so values are like the compass guiding us towards the life we want to create.
Mm-hmm.
And habits are like those little steps we take each day to move in that direction.
I love that analogy.
It makes it all feel so much more purposeful.
Absolutely. It's not just about mindlessly going through the motions, it's about making conscious choices that align with who we are and who we want to become.
So how do we make sure we're actually taking those steps?
Hmm.
I mean, life gets busy, distractions pop up. How do we stay on track and avoid getting sidetracked by those shiny objects that are constantly vying for our attention?
That's a great question, and it brings us to another important factor that clear highlights
Okay.
the power of identity-based habits.
Identity-based habits, we talked about identity earlier, right?
Did.
It's about those votes we cast for who we want to be.
Yeah.
But how does that specifically translate into our habits?
Well, Cleamy argues that our habits are not just actions.
Okay.
They're declarations of who we believe we are.
Interesting.
Each time we perform a habit, we're reinforcing that identity, that story we tell ourselves about ourselves.
Okay. I think I'm starting to get it. So if I want to be a writer,
Uh-huh.
it's not enough to just say I want to be a writer.
Right.
I actually have to write. The act of writing becomes a part of who I am.
Exactly. It's about embodying that identity through our actions.
And the more we act in alignment with that desired identity, the stronger that belief becomes.
Precisely. It's a powerful feedback loop.
So it's not about trying to change who we are. It's
Oh.
about becoming more aware of who we already are and then making choices that support that vision of ourselves.
Beautifully said. And as we cultivate those identity-based habits, we're not just changing our behavior.
Right.
We're changing our self-image, our beliefs about ourselves, and ultimately our entire reality.
This is mind-blowing. It's like those tiny habits are actually little levers that can shift our entire worldview.
I know, it's amazing.
It really is.
It makes you realize how much power we truly have to shape our own lives.
So powerful.
And speaking of power, let's talk about another powerful force that can either support or sabotage our efforts to build better habits.
Okay. What
The
the
power of social influence.
social influence, we touched on that a bit earlier when we talked about the company we keep. But how does that play into habit formation?
Well, Clear emphasizes the importance of joining a culture where your desired behavior is the norm.
Oh, okay. So like if you want to become a runner, it would be helpful to surround yourself with other runners.
Exactly, because when you see other people consistently engaging in that behavior, it starts to feel more normal, more attainable.
Right.
It's like those social norms become contagious.
It's much easier to stick with a new habit when you have a supported community around you.
Absolutely. And Clear also talks about the importance of finding role models and mentors who embody those qualities we aspire to.
I love that idea. It's like having a living, breathing example of what's possible.
And it can be incredibly motivating to see someone else who has already achieved the things that we're striving for. It shows us that it can be done.
So inspiring. So if we want to build better habits, we need to be mindful of the people we surround ourselves with and the influences we allow into our lives.
Absolutely. We need to surround ourselves with people who inspire us, who support us,
Mm-hmm.
and who challenge us to become our best selves.
This is so insightful. It's making me realize how interconnected we all are and how much our environment, both physical and social, can shape our behaviors.
And speaking of shaping our behaviors, let's talk about one of the biggest obstacles that people face when it comes to building better habits.
Okay, what's that?
Procrastination.
Ugh, procrastination. It's my nemesis.
Hmm.
Why is it so hard to just do the things we know we need to do?
Well, Claire offers some helpful insights into the psychology of procrastination.
Okay.
It talks about the importance of understanding those two selves, our present self and our future self.
Right. Our present self wants to do all those fun, easy things right now,
Exactly.
while our future self is the one who has to deal with the consequences of our procrastination later on.
Precisely. And that's where the struggle lies.
Right, the battle between those two selves.
Exactly. We need to find ways to bridge the gap between those two selves.
Okay.
To align our present actions with our future goals.
So how do we do that? How do we get those two selves to play nicely together?
Well, Clear suggests a technique called future self-journaling,
Future self-journaling. Okay.
where you write a letter to your future self talking about the goals you want to achieve
Oh, interesting.
and the steps you're taking to get there.
It's like having a conversation with the person you want to become. I can see how that would make those future goals feel more real and urgent.
Exactly. It helps to create a sense of connection and accountability.
Okay, so future self-journaling, I'm adding that to my list. Any other tips for overcoming procrastination?
Well, Clear also talks about the importance of creating implementation intentions,
Okay.
which are basically specific plans for when and where you will perform a new habit.
Okay, so instead of just saying, I'm going to eat healthier, I might say I'm going to pack a healthy lunch every night before work,
Yes,
so I'm not tempted to order takeout at lunchtime.
exactly. It's about removing the ambiguity and making those habits as concrete and actionable as possible.
It's like taking the decision-making out of the equation. I love that it makes it much harder to procrastinate when you've already made the plan in advance.
Precisely. And it also helps to anticipate those potential obstacles that might pop up and develop strategies for overcoming them.
So, like, if I know I'm likely to get tempted to skip my workout after a long day at work, I might pack my gym bag the night before or schedule my workout for first thing in the morning.
Exactly. It's about being proactive and setting yourself up for success.
This is so helpful.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm already starting to gain a better understanding of how my own brain works, how I can work with it rather than against it.
I'm so glad to hear that. And remember, building better habits is a journey, not a destination.
Right, it's a process.
There will be ups and downs, successes and setbacks.
Mhm.
The key is to keep learning, keep experimenting, and keep moving forward.
I'm feeling so inspired to keep diving deeper into these ideas and see where they take me. Are you ready to keep exploring?
Absolutely. Let's uncover even more hidden gems in the world of atomic habits.
Okay, so much good stuff already.
Mm.
I'm ready for more. What else do we have?
All right, let's shift gears a bit and talk about habit stacking. I think you'll like this one.
Habit stacking. I feel like we've touched on this before, right? Like using existing habits as like a foundation.
We have, but it's so important. It deserves its own spotlight.
Okay, I'm listening.
It's leveraging the power of those existing habits to build those new ones.
So like finding those natural entry points in our routines where we can kind of sneak in those new behaviors.
Exactly. Find a habit you already do consistently.
Okay.
Brushing your teeth, making your bed,
Right.
then stack a new one right on top of it.
So like after I brush my teeth, I'll meditate for 5 minutes.
Perfect. Or after I pour my coffee, I'll journal for 10 minutes.
I like that it just feels so much easier to stick to a new habit when it's attached to something I already do, like without even thinking about it.
Absolutely. And less overwhelming than changing your whole routine.
Right, exactly.
Clear has so many good habit stacking formulas in the book.
Oh, cool.
He even suggests just brainstorming all the things you do automatically
Yeah.
and then thinking about where you could tack on a new habit.
It's like turning your routine into like a domino effect of positive changes.
Exactly.
What's a habit you could stack a new one on?
Well, I always check my email first thing.
Okay. A lot of us are guilty of that.
So maybe I could do a quick yoga routine right after before I get sucked in.
I like it steal back those few minutes.
Okay, so we've got our habits stacked. What about rewards? Those are key, right?
Rewards? Oh, yeah. We can't forget about rewards.
Our brains are wired for instant gratification.
They are.
We have to make those good habits feel good or they just won't stick.
Right. We talked about temptation bundling, but what are some other ways to make those rewards more effective?
Clear loves using a habit tracker to see that visual representation of your progress.
I love habit trackers.
It might seem simple,
Yeah.
but checking off those boxes and seeing how far you've come is so satisfying.
I know. I love seeing those streaks build up in my habit tracker. It just makes me feel good.
It's like a reminder of how committed you are and all that progress you've made.
Yeah, it really is.
It taps into that primal desire for, progress and accomplishment.
Right.
But you have to choose the right rewards.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that are intrinsically motivating,
Oh, yeah.
aligned with those values and interests.
So it's not just like any reward. It has to be something that really matters to you.
Exactly.
It's kind of like what we were talking about with those identity-based habits.
You're finding that sweet spot where those actions, rewards, and your identity are all aligned.
Ooh. I like that. And I'm going to start thinking about that.
Now, there's something Clear doesn't really get into in the book,
Okay.
but it's so important.
What's that?
Self-compassion.
Oh, self-compassion. Yeah, I've heard of that, but I don't totally get it. How does that help with building habits?
Building better habits is hard work.
It is.
And there are going to be times when you slip up,
Yeah, definitely.
fall off track, or, just get discouraged. And it's so easy to just beat yourself up.
Totally my default.
But self-compassion is about treating yourself with kindness and understanding, like you would treat a friend who is struggling.
So it's about acknowledging that we're human, we make mistakes.
Exactly.
And that's okay.
Instead of criticizing ourselves, offer words of encouragement and support.
I like that.
It's about remembering that those setbacks are natural. They don't mean you failed.
It really takes the pressure off of having to be perfect all the time.
Exactly. So if you do miss a day,
Yeah, happens to all of us.
how do you get back on track?
Good question.
Clear has a great rule for this.
Okay.
Never miss twice.
Never miss twice.
They
I
didn't-
love that.
It's so simple, but so powerful.
Yeah, it's like a reminder that, We all slip up, but it's about not letting those slip-ups define us.
Exactly.
It's that resilience, bouncing back and keeping moving forward.
So much of this is mindset, right?
It really is.
It's the actions we take, but also those beliefs we hold about ourselves
Hold
and
on.
our ability to change.
Clear really emphasizes that shifting our identity piece,
You do?
seeing ourselves as the type of person who embodies those habits.
It's powerful.
It is. We've talked about it a lot today.
Uh,
But what about when those negative beliefs just creep in? You know, those voices saying you're not good enough, strong enough, disciplined enough.
that's where self-awareness comes in.
Okay.
Clear suggests things like journaling and mindfulness
Okay.
to become aware of those negative thought patterns so
Hmm.
you can start to challenge them.
So being the observer of your own mind
Exactly.
and noticing those thoughts without letting them take over.
And once you're more aware of those negative thoughts,
Yeah.
you can reframe them,
Okay.
challenge their validity,
Right.
replace them with something more empowering.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah.
So what if those negative thoughts are coming from outside? You know, those critical voices from people who aren't as supportive.
That's a great point. Clear talks a lot about surrounding yourself with supportive people,
Mm-hmm.
people who support your growth and believe in you.
We've talked about the power of influence today, right? Both positive and negative.
We have. And if you're constantly surrounded by people who doubt you or reinforce those negative beliefs,
Right.
it's so much harder to stick to those good habits.
It makes sense. So you have to be mindful of who you surround yourself with.
Absolutely. Choose those influences.
Yeah.
Spend less time with the people who drain you
Right.
and more time with the people who, lift you up.
It's about creating that supportive ecosystem for yourself inside and out.
Exactly. Now, before we wrap up,
Lori.
I have a thought-provoking question for you.
Okay. Hit me.
The book focuses on individual change, right?
Right.
But how can we apply these principles to create change on a larger scale?
Ooh.
Our communities,
Yeah.
our organizations, society as a whole.
That's a great question. It's like a reminder that the power of habits goes way beyond just us.
It does. The choices we make, the habits we cultivate,
Yeah.
they have a ripple effect.
Wow. That's powerful.
We're all interconnected.
So it's about being conscious creators, not just of our own lives, but of a better future for everyone.
I like that.
It's beautiful. What a great way to end this deep dive.
This has been such a pleasure exploring atomic habits with you.
So fun.
We uncovered so many great insights and strategies.
I feel so much more equipped to, approach my own habit formation journey with more intention and awareness.
I'm glad to hear that.
And I'm excited to start putting some of these strategies into practice
Me too.
and see what happens.
As James Clear says, success is the product of daily habits, not once-in-a-lifetime transformations.
That's good.
It's the small, consistent actions, those tiny steps that lead to those extraordinary results.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into atomic habits.
It was my pleasure.
We hope you found it insightful, inspiring, and empowering, and we encourage you to keep exploring these ideas, keep experimenting, and keep believing in the power of your own potential.